I'm here with Rob Gokee. Rob was kind enough to donate time, which he'll never do again because now he's award winning, on how to build like a song for me for the beginning of the secret show. And it wasn't that I wanted the best song in the world. I just wanted to understand the process because I thought it'd be fun. Rob, you're at robgokee.com. I would describe you as a musician who's done, your primary day job is making music for film, for TV, and sometimes web series as well. Did I do that even vague justice?
No, that's perfect. That's a great tagline. I'll just replace my tagline everywhere else with that one.
And you recently won the award for where? Because I tweeted it because I was so proud because we had just finished making music ourselves.
It was the IAWTV, which is the governing body of web and web television. I won Best Original Score for a series called Night of the Zombie King, which has nothing to do with zombies. It's actually a series about a group of people who played Dungeons & Dragons as high school students. They come back together about 10 years later, and there's some underlying drama within the group, and at the same time they're continuing a game. So it's a good juxtaposition between the two. But I won the award. The awards were in Vegas during CES a couple weeks ago. That's
so darn cool, and congratulations again. And
thanks.
That broke around the same time we were finishing up my stupid song for the secret show, which feedback has been quite mixed, and even my take on it is I don't think I'm smart enough to have made it sound the way I had it in my head or whatever. But I wanted to talk about the process because that was the interesting part to me. The output I could have given, I just don't care. Like I'm not emotionally tied to it as much as I was how much fun I had doing it. We started with drum beat, basically. And I found that interesting alone because I guess we started with time first. You said, how many seconds do I have? And you told me something interesting about how web people perceive that amount of time that they have in the start of a video and whatnot. Can you give people a guideline for how you would recommend putting links together?
When you have a series, a web series that's 3 to 5 minutes long, you can't spend 30 seconds to even a minute, definitely, on a theme song. So you need to keep it closer to about 10 seconds long, which is about the average for web. And that goes for pretty much any show because you trying to keep people interested. You need to keep moving constantly. You've got to keep them hooked. So it makes it a little more difficult because 10 seconds is hard to get a hook in that's memorable, so that the next time they hear that, they know immediately that they're watching that show.
Yeah, I'm listening to the basic.
A little longer.
Yeah, we went a little longer. Well, that was because I thought, I'm going to do like about an hour show. So I immediately have already given you the wrong premise, which you said, let's go 30-something seconds. Then we went to drums, and I said, I don't know, something tribal, something not 4/4, something not standard rock and roll. And you had like cool drum things already set up. I mean, is it more common that people would ask for obscure drum beats, or you're just the kind of guy who collects beats, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a combination of collecting them and not wanting to do the same thing every single time someone needs a drum beat. Because if it's a different project, I can give somebody 4/4 every single time, and that person would think it was, oh, that's perfect, that works well. I like the variety, and so I'll create drum beats and then save them so that I can reuse that beat in a different situation, or I'll come up with patterns that are a little bit different but exciting. And I think of it like building a house. The drums are definitely the foundation of the song. And if we have the drums going, it's a lot harder for you to play guitar over nothing and stay in time.
So it happens. And then we learned that I haven't played enough in the long time so that I still couldn't stay over time. So you had to like stretch or shrink my audio to make it work, which is another thing that people don't know is that, if they're recording into just GarageBand versus your kind of setup, good enough isn't good enough. I mean, you have to do some work to kind of keep tweaking it.
Right, and we did it in 2.5, 3 hours. So, obviously, if you're going to write a song, you're going to spend quite a bit more time than that normally. And as the guitar player, you would know your part and practice it for, the week before you came into the recording studio, and you could come in and record it. And it would be a little different process if it was a huge, full production.
And if I ever
to kind of get it together and do it on the fly, which was the fun part of the process.
I agree. I was going to say, in given infinite amounts of time, you produce really bad albums. There's just too many examples of that in the music industry. And given no time, you might get a little more creative. And in this case, where I fail is that, what I'm hearing in my head is nowhere near what lands on the guitar because I just can't do it yet. But, let's talk just for a second about one thing that you showed me. You're a guitarist. I mean, you have a history of playing guitar and all that. Guitar is not something you pick up anymore because
there are samples in some cases that are, and Zombie King is a perfect example. The soundtrack is acoustic guitar based. At the time, we were in a rush and we had a short deadline, and I didn't have time to plug in my guitar, mic it in the soundproof part of the room, find the right settings. I have a patch that sounds amazing as an acoustic guitar, so I had to learn how to play it right on a piano, which is, as a guitar player, is not easy to strum, and there's a whole feel to playing the guitar that you still don't get, but it's damn close. And it's close enough that when I went to the premiere for the show, people were coming up to me saying, "I didn't know you played guitar," and I said, "Yeah, of course, that was great." And I thought, okay, cool, I told people. That was the point.
Right. Well, and in your case, you do also play guitar. But I mean, when you were showing me how great the guitar sample sounded, I mean, there were several times where I kept saying, you know what? Why even bother? Why don't I not play guitar? And you should just key it. And you said, well, that's tricky though, because then what you miss all my imperfections. Essentially, is what we came up with as an excuse or a reason why I was allowed to still play guitar and not just let Rob take the project and run.
And there is a feel you get from live musicians that you can't get anywhere else, which is why they still use orchestras when you score a film.
I just heard, Rob, this is not related to this conversation, but what the hell, I've decided not to do the 4-minute one. This is the longer. The International Circus Convention happens every year in Monaco, and the person that they were interviewing on NPR for this was saying, who's the acts to watch in the music part of things? And they said, well, of course, everyone thinks Cirque, because Cirque du Soleil has turned circus music into new age music or something, and it's very unique kind of scored music. He said, but there's some really traditional circus music bands out there too. And the guy says, well, wait a minute, do they record? I mean, do they do live, or isn't it all recordings now? And evidently all the big circuses still do live, because you also can't predict how the act is going to go. And a lot of times if you do recording, people have to finish with no music because they've had to do the trick a few more times or something like that. So I guess we can say that as brilliant as you are with recording devices, there's still a place in the universe for live.
Right. I mean, if the elephant stampedes and you need to write fast chase music, then you've got people to do it on the spot.
That's exactly true. Rob, when people are buying this service from you or others, and I know that you tend to work for larger, you're making films and stuff like that. You're not typically talking to the web person who's thinking they want to make a show, a jingle for their podcast, I guess.
Right.
There are probably a few ways to do it. You can go to just like a PodSafe Audio kind of a place and just grab some audio. But if you were going to get into the process and all that, what do people even need to bring to this creatively on one side, and what should they expect to pay? I mean, even a ballpark, not just the Rob Gokee price, which I know is a lot more, but what should they expect to pay to even find the micro Rob Gokee?
In terms of what they bring to the table, for me, the collaboration is the most important part. So it's not necessarily what I can bring to the table, it's what we as a team, whether that team is a director or it's a creator of a podcast or it's a producer or a showrunner, it's their vision combined with my musical vision, and that's what makes the score or the theme song fit. And so you just need to kind of come with an idea of what you like and what you don't like. I really dislike you too, but I love Patsy Cline, so let's make this, as long as you have a general idea, then it's a good starting off point. The price always varies, and in terms of film, it's based on the budget. Generally, a composer of a studio film gets 4 to 5% of the budget of the entire film. But when you're working on an indie level, a lot of times it depends on how much they've got and how much you love the project and what you want to work with. It can be $300 a minute of score. Generally, it takes about a 12 to 14-hour day to write and record 2 minutes of score, and that's the writing process and the mixing. 2 finished minutes of music takes about a 12-hour day. So financially, you think of it in terms of, how many hours am I putting into what I have to do.
Wait a minute. So $600 for 2 score minutes, and that's 12 hours of your day. So
it's usually more like 14 to 16.
All right. Yeah. That's interesting. That's probably less than some people would have guessed, or maybe more. I have no idea what people think they're expecting to pay, but I find that reasonable. If I take 14 hours of your day to make 2 minutes of a theme and I got it for $600, I'd feel like I walked away like the winner.
And again, it varies depending on the person's budget. At least for me, it's never been a set process for me, which I think is why most composers never talk about price, because you can't just always give it a blanket price and work with that price all the time.
Right.
There are guys that I know they're paying for it out of their pocket or out of their day job. Let me get it for my tips. And so you don't necessarily want to gouge somebody who's, as opposed to someone who is generating revenue already from what they're doing, or they have an investor.
So, let's go to that for just 1 second, because I think that's interesting. And it's got to be sort of at LA, and I'm sure New York has that, and I'm sure there's other places, but you are surrounded by a bunch of aspiring people that you have to continuously make a gamble on in your head of, I'm going to do this for dirt for this person, because boy, I really hope that, Spielberg or Lucas grab this guy up, and suddenly one day he's going to come at me with like an $800K project, someday. Because you've got to pay the rent in LA, Rob.
Right.
You can't be doing this for tip jar guys, and still drink that coffee. So, tell me a little bit about, and you seem like a nicer guy than most. My guess is not all Hollywood music guys are like you. My guess is that a lot more of them are like, F you, I need the money up front, and there's like a lot more bridging.
All of them are like that. You should just hire me, because everyone else, trust me.
Exactly. I feel that way though. If people watching this are like, holy cow, this is what an LA film guy is like. Not true. You're Rob. You're you, and that's why we have a rapport and why we've known each other for a few years online. But that's not the typical guy out there, I don't think.
There are a lot of composers who are musicians first, and as a musician, let's say for instance you're making an album. If you make the album and then you get ready to show it to people, and someone tells you that one of the songs is wrong and they need to rewrite it, they are say, F you, it's my song. And so there are composers that will come at a project like that, like here's music, and the director will say, okay, this works, but this doesn't. And the composer's first reaction is, no, they all work. I wrote them. I'm not changing them. I come at it from a perspective of it's not my score. It's not my music. It's there to serve the film, and the director is my boss. And so I don't care how many times I have to rewrite it. It needs to be right, because we both need to be happy with it.
That's more interesting. That perspective is more interesting than I think the hours of stuff I've recorded so far of you and I talking, insofar as that's really hard for the right-brained types. And you are a right-brained type. You've played in bands. You're passionate about your compositions, but then there's the business side of this, and you need to divorce your emotions, from something like that, especially if you're getting paid, because on that side, and I've heard this said to me, and someone said, so what? I paid for it. It's no longer yours. It's mine. I paid for it.
Right.
And my heart went, oh, that's not true. It's still my baby. And I, not even in that creative control way, but in that it's not okay for you to malign it or do something awful with it. But you have to kind of do that, don't you?
Yeah, you have to let it go and know that they might cut it up and put it in a scene that you didn't originally write it for, or use it in a way that it wasn't originally intended. You have to be able to let go. I've been fortunate in 6.5 years to work with, I can't think of any situation where I've just thought, oh my God, that person just really butchered what I had. And, it's not, I don't even want it. It's not mine anymore. Everybody's been very generous, and most filmmakers will say, it is my film, but the score, it still belongs to you. You can pay for it. And you were talking about a gamble. You're right in that there were 2 web series I did last year. One was solo, and one was Night of the Zombie King. Both of them had little to no budget at all, but both had amazing scripts, and the people that I worked with were great. And I took the gamble on both of them, and ended up, those were the 2 that I was double nominated for. And I immediately thought, that it was worth every second that I spent on both of those scores, because you never know how it's going to work for you. It may not work for you financially, but it may open a door somewhere else for somebody. And it's always, you're always weighing the options with every single project. Is this project going to do something?
In advertising, which is a world I'm not involved in, and probably for this one reason, a lot of people say that a lot of advertising is done for the awards and have nothing to do with serving the client, which when I've heard that, I've full on flinched, just thinking, my God, I had no idea that was even a potential opportunity. Like, it didn't even strike me that would be how an advertising agency could play. Like, I guess I was so naive to think that all advertising is made in service of the client. Of course, that's who pays. Oh no. But when you win awards, is what I was told by the advertising people, then you get bigger gigs. And so you leverage your awards to get the bigger gig, and then you leverage the bigger gig to get the bigger award. That's not how you approach that in your heart. But now that you've won that award, do you feel that will open doors in 2012 for you that you didn't have?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't say one, other than just being honored to win the award and that everyone voted for me. The second thing I think of is, this will be a great tool in terms of marketing, because the other side of my brain that has to deal with money and marketing thinks, how can we make this work for us? What can I use this to leverage getting an agent? Can I use it to leverage getting bigger projects? It's to do this job, you have to be both people, because in the same conversation where you're talking about creatively what you want to do with the score of music, at the end of the conversation, the guy asks you how much you're going to charge. You suddenly have to be the accountant at the same time and switch hats. And it's very hard to do when you're trying to be creative. I almost wish I had a second guy I could just pull in that looked like me. It was just a clone. And I said, hold on, let me get the money guy. Have him sit right down.
And I'm learning that's, I am very right-brained. I spend a lot of my time in the creative side, and I, like you, probably go past the hours allotted for things and, spend more time thinking about certain things that I'm not going to ever see that money or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think that, but you're right that you need the money guy and you need the both. And you almost need to have a little, a pincher in your pants or something on your right-hand pocket side that pinches you about every 6 minutes and says, you are also in this role. Because I think, when we get down that, let's do it, we always end up in a dumb place. One last thing I was going to say, specific to the music, like I said, I ended up, the process was so fun for me to make the song. Like, we did this thing, we added some drums, and then I did a guitar lick, and then I threw my own harmony over it, and I was like, woohoo, I'm 2 guitarists at once. I feel like the 90s. What came out the other end, is cohesive, and it was what I asked for. It just isn't. It isn't what I heard in my head, or
what was in your head yet. Yeah, and obviously if we had 2 weeks to work on it, and we would go back and forth. If this was a film project, I would have sent you that, and you would have said, okay, this part I like, this part I don't like, it's not working for me, I don't know why, we need to work on it, take this out, try this, and we would try different things,
sure,
and until we got it nailed into where it needed to be.
Well, and then I said, and why in my mind did I think this sort of almost Russian-sounding music would be like, upbeat or something? It's a sloggy minor chord song. But anyway, what I did like was I loved the back and forth. I loved that, we somehow randomly, because of this, my thought that it sounded Russian, went down this naming convention thing where we had mob bosses and White Russian. The song's called White Russian because that's where it ended.
The project. That's what the name of the project is.
The project, right. And so I love that. And I asked you the question, are there sometimes little secret in jokes on score names or things like that? And you said yes. I guess in closing, because, we have to end this somewhere. When you are, there's got to be tough times. There's got to be, obviously every business has tough times.
Right.
I was going to say maybe last year would have been your tough time, but maybe it works out there that the guy who normally would bill at like $600 a produced minute got bumped off and you were picking up all his projects. I don't know. But when it gets tough for you, Rob, what keeps you in the game? Like, how do you decide, I guess I'm going to go back and get an office job again, or I need a cubicle or something? How do you stay in the game?
Last year was actually my best year ever in that I had continual work from January to December without a gap. And it's the first year that I didn't have any kind of gap, because normally in this business you end up with a lull. Because you'll say yes to 4 or 5 projects, and then all of them will be in some various state of production, and you are waiting for them to hit. And what happens almost every single time is that they all hit at once.
I just paused thinking, that's always been my way. It's always been the way that, everything's in clumps. You're either going to die or, you're not, but it's always to be in clumps. It's never like one at a time or anything.
But it's you're right, and it's difficult. There are times where it's slow and you're thinking, do I need to get a 9-to-5 job? I try and always have enough balls in the air that if things slow down, that something else is in the works, whether I'm submitting to a library, a music library for inclusion, so that, maybe I'm making money from tracks there. I'm working on a book on indie composing on the side, although I haven't had a whole lot of time for that since I announced that I was going to do it. So I just try and have enough things going, and you have to look for the work before you run out of the work, because what happens is if you run out, then there's the process of getting a gig takes forever, especially if you come in when there's still a script. You still have to wait for them to shoot it and get through post-production, and that takes months in most cases.
Success is the ability to say no to the jobs you don't want. And when you're humping for work at that moment, when you haven't really kept the prospecting going, is when you are the least successful, because that is when you're suddenly like, I hate these people and I'm still going to say yes because I need the 10 grand or whatever it is.
Right.
So I feel that. Rob, we can go to robgokee.com. I've put that URL up a few different times, but I just wanted to strain it there. You're also on pretty much every social network, I think. I've
tried to downsize it a little bit. I'm on Facebook, Google Plus, and Twitter, and those are the 3 pretty much. And I have a presence on LinkedIn, but I haven't figured out how to leverage LinkedIn directly for what I do yet. But yeah, you can find me in any of those.
So there's 2 things about that, Rob. You put them in the order that I think you might prefer them at present. Like you might be getting a lot more play on Facebook than Google Plus.
No, if I did it that way, it would be Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus.
Right. So then, MySpace is missing, and for the longest time, my ongoing joke has been, the only 2 people on MySpace are bands and hookers.
Yes. And when I find bands on MySpace, I just want to say, really, you're still there. You just need to close the profile and move on.
Yep. Your awesome top 8, including Tila Tequila, is no longer helping you make business. Anyway, Rob, it was a pleasure, and there's such a long wealth of video that I shot for this, and a lot of screencasting and all this kind of crap, and I'm going to produce like this huge piece of film that will do nothing more than show like the tops of our heads and long silences, but I'm going to do it because I think that ultimately I think it'll give people that behind the scenes that maybe they could play in the background every now and again and say, this is how it really came together, and this is how it will come together for you. And obviously, anyone only wants is like all anyone wants is the less than 2-minute version of our interview. But should they want to get a little deeper? Should they get a little deeper still? When you're passionate about something, you go deeper and deeper into it. Like when you get on those Amazon kicks where you're like, I need this many more of this thing because I think I need it. So that's why we'll produce it. Rob, thanks again. The process was great, and I will try never to darken your door with a non-$300 produced minute project again, but
it was a lot of fun. I had fun, so it was a great process for me. I really enjoyed it. I don't think I'd ever worked in that manner before, especially via Skype and creating a piece on the fly from thousands of miles away.
Yeah, we were like the postal service,
Exactly.
except there's no way I could play, such great heights. Otherwise, I would have.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, totally a pleasure, and thank you.